When a presentation worth $18 million dies on a frozen highway, the last person you trust is a stranger with oil under his fingernails. But Maya Hartford had 28 minutes, a dead Audi, and 0 options. The man who stopped didn't want her money. He wanted a sandwich. What she didn't know, he used to design the engines she was about to pitch. What he didn't know, saving her morning would cost him everything he'd hidden from. Some coincidences aren't accidents. Some strangers aren't really strangers. And sometimes the fastest way forward is letting someone else under the hood. The first thing Maya noticed that morning wasn't the cold. It was the silence. She'd been flying down I-90 just west of Chicago, the skyline a glittering promise in her rearview mirror. Her presentation deck sat loaded and perfect on the passenger seat. 127 slides refined through 3 months of 18-hour days. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 sharp.
She had 28 minutes. The highway stretched clear ahead. Coffee steamed in the cup holder. Everything in her carefully constructed world sat exactly where it needed to be. Then the engine coughed. Just once. A wet, wrong sound that didn't belong in a $62,000 vehicle with a maintenance record cleaner than most medical files. Maya's hands tightened on the wheel. She'd heard that sound before, years ago, in her father's old Buick, right before it stranded them outside Toledo in the rain. Her throat constricted. The Audi coughed again. This time it shuddered, the kind of full-body tremor that meant something vital had just quit. The dashboard erupted into a Christmas display of warning lights. Yellow, red, symbols she'd never seen before and didn't have time to decipher. The engine stuttered, caught, stuttered again. Died. Maya felt the power steering vanish first, the wheel suddenly heavy in her hands as she wrestled the car toward the shoulder.
No acceleration. No response from the pedal. Just momentum and gravity, and the sick certainty that everything she'd prepared for was about to slip through her fingers because a machine had chosen the worst possible moment to betray her. She coasted to a stop on the gravel shoulder, gripping the wheel until her knuckles went white. For 5 full seconds, she sat frozen, staring at the dashboard like she could will it back to life through sheer force of personality. It didn't work. She turned the key. Nothing. Turned it again. The engine didn't even try, just a pathetic clicking sound, final as a door slamming shut. Maya checked her phone. 26 minutes. Vanguard Automotive headquarters sat 17 miles away in Schaumburg, tucked into the gleaming tech corridor where legacy companies pretended they understood the future. Even if she called a rideshare right now, even if one materialized instantly, she'd be cutting it too close. The board didn't wait. They especially didn't wait for 35-year-old vice presidents who'd been given exactly 1 shot to prove they deserved a seat at the table. She'd spent 3 months on this presentation, 3 months of data modeling and supplier negotiations, and nights that bled into mornings. She'd built a pitch for a partnership with Titan Cell Battery that would position Vanguard as a serious player in the electric vehicle market, a deal that could shift the entire trajectory of the company, her career with it. And now she was going to miss it because her car had died on the side of a highway. Maya pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. 10 seconds. She'd allow herself exactly 10 seconds of pure, undiluted panic. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her throat felt tight. The kind of fear that came from knowing you'd done everything right and it still wasn't going to be enough. Then the 10 seconds were up. She lifted her head. She was Maya Hartford. She'd clawed her way from a state school scholarship to a VP title at 35. She didn't fall apart when things went wrong. She found solutions. The roadside assistance app promised 90 to 120 minutes. Useless. Her assistant Stephanie wouldn't start until 8:30, and it was barely 7:45 now. Maya scrolled through her contacts, searching for anyone close enough to help. Anyone who owed her a favor big enough to drop everything and rescue her from the middle of nowhere. Nothing. Everyone she knew was either already at work, too far away, or not the kind of person you called in an emergency. That was the price of climbing fast. You didn't build a safety net. You built a ladder. Maya looked out the windshield at the empty stretch of highway. A few cars blew past, their drivers too focused on their own destinations to notice a stranded Audi. The morning sun burned through the clouds, cold and pale. The kind of light that made everything look stark and unforgiving. 23 minutes. She was about to call a cab company directly, willing to pay double, triple, whatever it took, when she saw the pickup truck. It was old, 15 years, maybe older. Faded blue paint and a dent in the driver's side door that looked like it had a story. The truck slowed as it approached, then pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet behind her, gravel crunching under worn tires. Maya's first instinct was caution. She was a woman alone on a highway. She'd seen enough news stories to know that not every good Samaritan had good intentions. But desperation has a way of recalculating risk, and right now she didn't have the luxury of being picky. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered in a way that came from work rather than a gym. Mid to late 30s, maybe. Dark hair that needed a trim, a flannel shirt layered over a thermal, jeans that had seen better days, work boots that had earned their scuffs. But it was his hands Maya noticed first, stained with oil that no amount of scrubbing would ever fully remove. Chemical burns marked his knuckles, the kind of wear that came from years of working with engines and metal and things that didn't forgive mistakes. He walked toward her car slowly, hands visible, movements careful and non-threatening. When he got close enough, he tapped gently on the window. Maya hesitated for half a second, then lowered it. His voice came quiet, steady, the kind of voice that didn't waste words. "Morning. Saw you pulled over. You okay?" "Car died." Maya tried to keep the edge of panic out of her tone. "Just died. I have somewhere I need to be in 20 minutes and I don't." She stopped herself. He didn't need her life story. The man glanced at the Audi, then back at her. "Mind if I take a look? Do you know cars?" Something flickered in his expression. Not offense, just quiet amusement, like he'd heard that question before and found it funny. "Yeah, I know cars." Maya wanted to ask for credentials, for proof, for something that would tell her this stranger wasn't going to make things worse. But the clock was ticking, and she was out of options. "Okay, yes, please." He nodded once, then walked around to the front of the car. "Pop the hood." She pulled the release lever. The hood gave a soft click. The man lifted it with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before, propping it open with the support rod. Then he leaned in, one hand braced on the frame, and just looked. Maya watched him through the windshield, her fingers drumming anxiously on the wheel. He wasn't rushing, wasn't making a show of it, just methodical, checking connections, testing hoses, his eyes moving with focused intelligence that made her reconsider her initial assessment. This wasn't just some guy who changed his own oil. This was someone who understood engines the way musicians understood instruments. After a minute, he straightened up, walked back to her window. "When's the last time you had the battery terminals cleaned?" Maya blinked. "I don't know. The dealership handles all the maintenance." He nodded like that told him everything he needed to know. "Your battery's fine, but the connection's corroded. It's not getting clean flow to the starter. I've got tools in my truck. I can clean it off. Might get you running again." "How long will that take?" 10 minutes, maybe 15.
Maya checked her phone. 19 minutes until the meeting. If he could really fix it in 10, she could still make it. She'd be sweating, her hair would be a mess, but she'd be there. Please, I'll pay you whatever you want.
The man shook his head. Don't worry about it. He walked back to his truck and returned with a toolbox that looked older than the vehicle itself. Maya watched as he pulled out a wire brush, a wrench, and a small bottle of something she didn't recognize. Then he went to work. She'd never paid much attention to how cars actually functioned. They were tools, appliances, things that either worked or didn't. But watching this stranger move through the engine bay with quiet confidence, she found herself oddly mesmerized. Every movement was deliberate, no wasted motion. He loosened the terminal clamps, brushed away the white-green corrosion with careful strokes, wiped everything down with a rag, then reconnected everything with the same precision. Try it now. Maya turned the key. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught. The dashboard light stabilized. The familiar hum of the motor filled the car. Relief hit her so hard she actually felt dizzy. Oh, thank God. But then the engine stuttered, coughed. The RPMs dropped sharply. No, come on. It died again. The man was already back under the hood before she could say anything. This time his expression was different, more focused. A small crease between his eyebrows that suggested he'd just encountered something that didn't fit the pattern. Maya checked her phone. 15 minutes. She could feel the opportunity slipping away second by second. Even if he got it running right now, she'd hit traffic. She'd arrive flustered, unprepared, off her game. The board would see it in her face before she said a single word. But there was nothing else to do but wait. She watched the stranger work, his hands moving deeper into the engine now, checking things she couldn't name. At one point, he pulled out his phone and used the flashlight to peer into a space she couldn't see from her angle. He was muttering to himself, too quiet for her to hear, but she could see his lips moving. Running through possibilities. Diagnosing in real time. 10 minutes. How's it looking? Maya asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Fuel pump relay's toast. That's why it keeps dying. Battery issue was just the first symptom. Can you fix it? He was quiet for a moment. Not here. You'd need a replacement part. Maya's stomach dropped. So I'm stuck. Yeah, but I can bypass it. Temporary fix, but it'll get you where you're going. How temporary? Should hold for a day, maybe 2. You'll need to get it into a shop after that. Do it, please. He nodded, went back to his truck, this time returning with a small coil of wire and what looked like electrical connectors. Maya had no idea what he was doing as he spliced into the wiring harness, his fingers moving with practiced speed. But she could see the concentration on his face, the kind of focus that came from someone who'd solved problems like this 100 times before. 5 minutes. She was going to be late. Even if he finished right now, she was going to be late. Maya pulled out her phone, typed a quick message to Stephanie. Running behind, car trouble, stall if you can. The response came back almost immediately. Board's already gathering. I'll try. 3 minutes. The stranger twisted 2 wires together, secured them with electrical tape, then carefully tucked everything back into place. Try it. Maya turned the key for the 3rd time, expecting nothing. The engine roared to life. Smooth, steady, no stuttering, no hesitation. The dashboard looked normal, all the warning lights gone except the one telling her to check the engine soon, which, under the circumstances, she could live with. Oh my God, you did it. The man closed the hood,
walked back to her window, wiping his hands on a rag that was already beyond saving. It'll hold, but don't push it. Get it looked at today if you can. Maya was already shifting into drive, her mind racing through the fastest route, calculating whether she could shave 2 minutes off by taking the service road. Thank you, seriously, thank you so much. How much do I owe you? Nothing. I can't. You just saved my entire career. I have to give you something. Don't need anything. He started to walk back toward his truck. Wait! Maya reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet, but he was already shaking his head. Please, at least let me buy you breakfast or… I'm good. Desperation made her bold. She grabbed the brown paper bag from the passenger seat, the turkey sandwich she'd made at 5:30 that morning, back when the biggest worry in her life was whether the board would like slide 14. Then take this. I was going to eat it later, but you need it more than I do. The stranger paused. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. A crack in the careful neutrality he'd maintained since pulling over.
He looked at the sandwich like it was something precious. You sure? Positive. It's the least I can do. He took it carefully, holding it like it might break. Thanks. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out one of her business cards, pressing it into his grease-stained hand. Maya Hartford, Vanguard Automotive. If you ever need anything, call me. I mean it. He glanced at the card, slipped it into his shirt pocket without reading it. Hope your meeting goes well. Then he turned and walked back to his truck, the sandwich still in his hand. Maya didn't wait to see him drive away. She was already accelerating back onto the highway, her heart pounding, adrenaline burning through her veins. She had 7 minutes to make a 17-mile drive. She was going to do it if it killed her. The boardroom at Vanguard Automotive occupied the entire 18th floor of the headquarters building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago suburbs sprawling toward the horizon. On a normal day, Maya loved this room. It represented everything she'd worked for: power, influence, the ability to shape decisions that affected thousands of people. Today, it felt like a guillotine. She burst through the doors at 9:07, breathless, her hair slightly windblown, her blouse wrinkled from gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The 12 board members seated around the massive oak table all turned to look at her with varying expressions of irritation and curiosity. My apologies. Maya willed her voice to sound calm and professional instead of like she'd just sprinted from the parking garage. Car trouble on the highway. It's handled. Robert Kensington, the silver-haired CEO who'd given her this opportunity in the first place, gestured to the empty chair. We were beginning to think you'd reconsidered. Never. Maya set her bag down, pulled out her laptop, and connected it to the presentation system with hands that were only slightly trembling. Shall we begin? The next 45 minutes were a blur of slides and data points, fielding sharp questions from executives who'd been doing this since before she was born, defending projections and explaining risk mitigation strategies. But Maya had prepared for this. She'd lived with these numbers for months, had stress-tested every assumption, had built contingencies for contingencies. And somewhere around minute 30, she felt the shift in the room. The skeptical expressions softened. The pointed questions became genuine curiosity. Robert leaned forward in his chair. Maya knew she'd hooked him. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Robert smiled. Well, that was worth waiting 7 minutes for. Laughter rippled around the table. Maya felt the tension drained from her shoulders. The partnership proposal is approved, pending legal review, of course. But I think I speak for everyone here when I say this is exactly the kind of forward-thinking strategy Vanguard needs. Well done, Maya. The other board members murmured agreement. Maya let herself feel the victory. She'd done it.
Despite the catastrophic morning, despite everything that could have gone wrong, she delivered. As the meeting broke up and executives filed out discussing next steps and implementation timelines, Robert pulled her aside. "That was impressive, but next time leave 30 minutes earlier." Maya laughed despite herself. "Noted." "I'm serious though. You've got the talent, Maya. Don't let logistics be what holds you back." "I won't."
She gathered her things and headed down to the parking garage, where her Audi sat in its assigned spot, looking innocent, like it hadn't nearly destroyed her entire morning. The engine started smoothly when she turned the key, the temporary fix holding just like the stranger had promised. Maya sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, the adrenaline finally starting to fade into exhaustion. She'd been so focused on the meeting, on saving her presentation, that she hadn't had time to fully process what had happened on that highway. A complete stranger had stopped to help her, had spent over an hour diagnosing and fixing a problem that wasn't his responsibility, had refused payment, refused anything except a sandwich. Who did that anymore? She pulled out her purse, looking for his business card, then remembered. She didn't have his card. She'd given him hers. She didn't even know his name. The thought bothered her more than it should have. Maya wasn't used to owing people, to being in someone's debt without a clear way to repay it. She liked clean transactions, explicit exchanges. This felt unfinished. She started the car and drove to the dealership, just like he'd advised. The service manager took one look under the hood and whistled low. "Somebody did a bypass on your fuel pump relay. Clean work, too." This wasn't a dealership repair. "How long would this have taken you to fix?" The manager checked his computer. "With parts and labor, we'd have had to order the relay, probably 2 days before we could even start." "Who did this for you?" "Just someone who stopped to help." The manager looked at her like she'd described encountering a unicorn. "Well, whoever they were, they knew what they were doing. This isn't amateur work. I'd hire them." Maya drove home that evening with the replacement relay properly installed and a bill that made her wince, but the car was fine. Perfect, even. The crisis had been averted. The meeting had been a success. Her career was still on track. She should have been celebrating. Instead, she sat in her pristine downtown condo, staring out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about grease-stained hands and a quiet voice, and someone who'd refused money but accepted a sandwich like it was worth more. She thought about the way he'd moved under the hood, confident, knowledgeable, completely unbothered by the luxury vehicle or her obvious desperation, like fixing impossible problems was just something he did. Maya pulled out her phone and opened a search engine. She typed in combinations of keywords: mechanic, Chicago suburbs, fuel pump relay, bypass repair. Nothing useful came up. She didn't even know where to start looking. After 30 minutes of fruitless searching, she gave up. Whoever the stranger was, he'd vanished back into his life, probably never thinking about her again. But Maya couldn't stop thinking about him. Not in a romantic way, at least she didn't think so. It was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or the uncomfortable recognition that she'd been saved by someone who lived in a completely different world than hers. Someone who probably saw her expensive car and tailored suit and made assumptions about who she was. Assumptions that weren't entirely wrong. She'd spent the last 5 years building a life defined by success metrics. Promotions, salary increases, proximity to power. She'd sacrificed relationships, hobbies, anything that didn't directly contribute to climbing the ladder. And it had worked. She was exactly where she wanted to be. But sitting alone in her condo that night, eating takeout from a container because she'd never learned to cook properly and didn't have time anyway, Maya found herself wondering what the stranger's life looked like. Did he have family waiting for him when he got home? Friends he met up with on weekends? A life that existed outside the narrow confines of career advancement? She shook her head, annoyed with herself. This was ridiculous. He'd helped her. She'd thanked him. That was the end of the story. She didn't need to construct some elaborate narrative about a man she'd spent less than 90 minutes with. But when she went to bed that night, she couldn't help pulling out the business card, her card, and looking at it. Her name embossed in crisp black letters. Maya Hartford, Vice President, Strategic Development, Vanguard Automotive. He had her contact information. If he ever needed anything, he knew how to reach her. The question was, would he? 3 days passed. Maya threw herself into the partnership implementation, managing the legal review process, coordinating with supplier teams. The work was demanding, complex, exactly the kind of high-stakes project management that had earned her the VP track in the first place. She didn't think about the stranger. That was a lie. She thought about him at odd moments, waiting for her coffee to brew, stuck in traffic, lying awake at 3 in the morning when her brain wouldn't shut off. But she didn't dwell on it, which was different. On Friday evening, she was working late in her office when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost declined, but something made her answer. Maya Hartford. Silence. Then a voice, quiet, careful, that she recognized immediately. Miss Hartford, this is going to sound strange, but you gave me your card a few days ago, on I-90. Maya's breath caught. She knew that voice. I remember. Is your truck okay? A pause. Truck's fine. I'm actually calling because... Okay, this is going to sound strange, but I wanted to say thank you. For the sandwich. Maya blinked. You called to thank me for a sandwich you already thanked me for? It was a really good sandwich. Despite everything, Maya smiled. It was turkey and Swiss on wheat. Nothing special. It was lunch. I hadn't eaten breakfast. Was going to skip lunch, too. I usually do when I'm working. But that sandwich... I don't know. It mattered. There was something in his voice, something deeper than the words. And Maya found herself leaning forward in her chair. I'm glad it helped. Another pause. I also wanted to apologize for not introducing myself properly that morning. I was focused on the repair, and I didn't think... He stopped. Anyway, I'm Daniel. Daniel Rivers. Most people call me Dan. It's nice to officially meet you, Dan. You too. He sounded slightly awkward, like he wasn't used to phone conversations with strangers. How'd your meeting go? I got there with 3 minutes to spare and completely crushed it. Because of you. So really, I should be thanking you again. We're even then. We're really not. Maya hesitated, then made a decision. Can I buy you dinner? Properly this time, not just handing you a sandwich on the side of a highway. The silence stretched long enough that she thought he might refuse. You don't have to do that. I know. I want to. Why? It was a fair question. Maya didn't have a simple answer. Because you helped me when you didn't have to. Because I'm curious how you knew how to bypass that relay when the dealership said it would take 2 days. And because I've been thinking about that morning all week, and I'd like to understand it better. She could hear him breathing, considering. Finally, okay, yeah. Dinner would be nice. They made plans for Sunday evening, a small Italian place halfway between her condo and wherever he lived.
Nothing fancy, which was fine. This wasn't a date. It was closure, understanding, a chance to properly thank someone who'd given her something she couldn't quantify in dollars. When Maya hung up, she was smiling for the first time all week. And somewhere 17 miles away, in a small apartment in Elmhurst, Daniel Rivers stood in his kitchen, staring at his phone, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. The apartment was quiet.
Sophie was already asleep in her room, her nightlight casting soft shadows on walls covered with her drawings. Dragons and castles, and one that showed her and her daddy and her mommy in heaven. A picture that made Dan's chest ache every time he looked at it. He walked to the kitchen table where his laptop sat. Old. A Dell from 2016 that took forever to boot up. He opened it anyway, pulled out Maya's business card, stared at it for a long moment, then typed into Google, Vanguard Automotive Careers. The page loaded, and there, third result down, was a job posting that made his breath stop. Lead EV Thermal Engineer. Vanguard Automotive, Schaumburg, IL. Salary range, $135,000 to $175,000. Requirements: 5+ years experience in thermal management systems, expertise in battery cooling for electric vehicles, publications in peer-reviewed journals preferred. Dan read the job description 3 times. Every word could have been written specifically for him. This was his expertise, his specialty. The work he'd done in Detroit before everything fell apart. His cursor hovered over the Apply Now button. He looked toward Sophie's room. The door was cracked open. Her frozen nightlight glowed soft blue. She'd had a good day today. No nightmares last night. No anxiety attacks at school. Just a normal 8-year-old excited about art class and asking if they could get pizza for dinner. Normal was precious. Normal was what he'd fought for these past 5 years. Dan closed the laptop. He couldn't do that to her. Couldn't risk becoming the person he'd been in Detroit. The one who missed everything because he was too focused on the next prototype, the next deadline, the next promotion. The person who'd been in a conference room when his wife collapsed and his 3-year-old daughter had to call 911 alone. He'd made a promise to Amanda in those final hours. Sophie comes first, always. But he kept Maya's card, slipped it into his wallet next to the photo of Sophie and Amanda from 2016, back when they'd still been a family. Back when he'd believed nothing could touch them. His phone sat on the table, screen dark. He picked it up, opened a new text message to Maya's number, started typing. Miss Hartford, I've been thinking about... Deleted it. Tried again. Maya, I wanted to explain why I... Deleted that too. Finally, he just wrote, had a good conversation tonight. Looking forward to Sunday. Hit send before he could overthink it. The reply came 2 minutes later. Me too. 6 p.m. at Lucia's? Dan typed back. Perfect. See you then. He set the phone down, sat in the quiet kitchen of his small apartment, surrounded by Sophie's drawings and the ghost of everything he'd lost. Outside, Chicago hummed with its usual Friday night energy, people heading to bars, restaurants, lives full of possibilities they probably took for granted. Dan had stopped taking anything for granted 5 years ago. Had stopped believing in possibilities around the same time. He'd built a small, safe life. One where he could be present for his daughter. Where he wouldn't miss the important things because he was chasing the impressive ones. But sitting there with Maya's text glowing on his screen, something stirred in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. He pulled out his laptop again, Opened it to that job posting one more time. Lead EV thermal engineer. The kind of position he used to dream about. The kind of work that mattered, that could change things. The kind of work that had cost him everything once before. Dan looked at Sophie's door again, thought about her question from last week. "Daddy, how come you don't smile when you talk about work anymore?" He'd told her, "I smile about you, sweetheart. That's what matters." And she'd hugged him and said, "But you can smile about both things, right?" Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. Dan closed the laptop for the second time, but he didn't delete Maya's text, didn't block the number or make excuses to cancel Sunday. Because maybe, just maybe, there was a version of this story where he didn't have to choose between being a good father and being the engineer he'd trained to be. Maybe Maya Hartford, with her crisp business cards and her expensive car and her $18 million presentations, knew something he didn't. Maybe she could see a path he'd convinced himself didn't exist. Or maybe he was just tired of being afraid. He stood up, checked on Sophie one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her breathing soft and even. Walked to his own room. Tomorrow he'd take her to the park like he did every Saturday. They'd get ice cream, even though it was October and too cold for it. She'd draw while he pushed her on the swings. Normal. Precious. Simple. But Sunday night, he'd have dinner with a woman who'd looked at him on the side of a highway and seen someone worth knowing. Someone worth calling. Someone worth more than the oil stains under his fingernails. And maybe, just maybe, he'd let himself believe that was true. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Chicago feel alive. Dan stood in front of his bathroom mirror at 5:15, wondering when getting ready for dinner had become this complicated. He'd bought new jeans yesterday, dark Levi's that still had the crease lines from the package, a button-down shirt that wasn't flannel, his only pair of dress shoes, polished until they almost looked new. Sophie sat on the edge of the bathtub, watching him with the kind of serious expression 8-year-olds wore when they were trying to figure out adult behavior. "You look nice, Daddy." "Thanks, sweetheart." "Is Maya your girlfriend?" Dan's hand froze mid-tie. "She's a friend. A really good friend." Sophie's knowing smile suggested she didn't buy it for a second. "Okay, Daddy." Mrs. Chen was picking Sophie up at 5:30 for a sleepover with her granddaughter. The timing felt both perfect and terrifying. No daughter meant no excuse to leave early if things got awkward. No built-in escape route. The doorbell rang. Mrs. Chen stood in the hallway, 70 years old and sharp as a tack, taking in Dan's appearance with undisguised approval. "You look handsome, Daniel." "She deserves this. It's just dinner." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Amanda would want you to be happy. You know that." The words hit harder than they should have. Dan nodded, not trusting his voice. Sophie grabbed her overnight bag, hugged Dan tight around the waist. "Have fun with your not girlfriend." "I will." "Be good for Mrs. Chen." After they left, the apartment felt too quiet. Dan checked his reflection one more time, pocketed his wallet and keys, and headed out before he could talk himself out of it. Lucia's sat nestled in a strip mall in Elk Grove Village. The kind of place you'd drive past 100 times without noticing. Red and white checkered tablecloths, wine bottles as decorations, the smell of garlic and tomato sauce thick enough to taste. Maya's Audi was already in the parking lot when Dan pulled up at 5:50. Through the window he could see her sitting in the driver's seat, looking at her phone. She'd arrived early too. Something about that settled the nerves in his chest. He parked next to her. She looked up, smiled, and climbed out. She dressed down from the highway morning, dark jeans, a cashmere sweater in deep blue,
minimal jewelry. Her hair was loose instead of pulled back. She looked younger, more relaxed, more real. "Hi." Her voice carried a nervousness that matched his own. "How've you been?" They stood in the parking lot like teenagers on a first date, neither quite ready to go inside. "Good, busy. The partnership I told you about is moving forward."
"That's great. Congratulations."
"Thanks. How's your truck?"
Dan smiled despite himself. "Still running." Maria greeted them at the door. 65 years old, Italian-American, her family had owned this place for 40 years. Her face lit up when she saw Dan. "Daniel, finally you bring someone nice. I was starting to worry." Maya laughed. Dan felt his face heat. "Maria, this is Maya. Maria makes the best lasagna in the suburbs." "Flattery won't get you extra bread," Maria winked. "But for your lady friend, maybe I make exception." She led them to a corner booth, talking the entire way about how Dan hadn't been in for months and she'd started to worry, and did he want his usual, or was he feeling adventurous tonight? Maya watched the interaction with undisguised fascination. This version of Dan, relaxed, almost playful, was different from the careful stranger on the highway. "You're a regular here. It's close to home, and Maria's been feeding me since I moved to the area." "When was that?" "About 6 years ago." Maria returned with menus and a bottle of Chianti that she insisted was on the house. After she left, Maya leaned forward. "So, tell me how a guy who can bypass a fuel pump relay in 15 minutes ends up working odd jobs in the Chicago suburbs." Dan took a long drink of wine. "That's a complicated story. I've got time." He studied her across the table, trying to decide how much truth to offer, how much vulnerability he could afford. "I used to be an engineer, thermal management systems, work for a supplier in Detroit, Titan Drive Systems. We did work for GM, Ford, Chrysler. I was good at it." Past tense. Maya's expression stayed carefully neutral. "Yeah? Why'd you leave?" The question sat between them like a live wire. Dan could deflect, could give her the sanitized version, could protect himself the way he'd been protecting himself for 5 years. Instead, he told the truth. "My wife died. Cancer." By the time they caught it, there was nothing anyone could do. And I'd been so focused on my career, on the next project, on proving myself. I missed it. Missed her getting sick. Missed the signs. Missed everything until it was too late. Maya's hand moved across the table, stopped just short of touching his. "I'm so sorry." She called me one night when I was at a conference in Detroit, SAE World Congress. 3 days of presentations and networking and prototype demonstrations. She said she was in pain, that something felt wrong. I told her to call her doctor. I was in dinner with suppliers. His voice stayed steady, but his hands were shaking. The next morning, I got a call from Henry Ford Hospital. My daughter, Sophie, she was 3, had called 911 when Amanda collapsed. A 3-year-old had to save her mother because I wasn't there. "Dan." Maya's voice was soft. Not pity, just presence. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to death." I quit my job immediately, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. She died thinking I'd chosen work over her, and she was right. That's not "it is." Dan met Maya's eyes. After she died, I couldn't go back to that life. Couldn't pretend that designing engines for luxury cars mattered when I'd failed at the one thing that actually did. So I quit, moved to Chicago to be near her family, and I've been here ever since, doing just enough work to pay the bills and keep myself present for Sophie. The silence that followed felt heavy. Dan waited for Maya to make an excuse, to check her watch and remember she had somewhere else to be, to realize that dinner with a broken widower wasn't what she'd signed up for. Instead, she took a drink of wine and asked, "How old is Sophie now?" 8. She's smart and funny and asks questions I don't know how to answer. Like whether her mom remembers her from heaven, or if she did something wrong that made her mom sick. Dan's throat tightened. And I don't know what to tell her except that none of it was her fault. That her mom loved her more than anything. That I'm trying my best to be enough for both of us. You are enough. The certainty in Maya's voice caught him off guard. You stopped on a highway to help a stranger. You spent an hour fixing my car and refused to take anything but a sandwich. You're raising your daughter alone while dealing with grief most people couldn't survive. That's not failure, Dan. That's heroism. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a coward who ran away because he was too scared to face what he'd lost. Maybe. Or maybe you made the only choice that would let you keep the one person you had left. Their food arrived, lasagna for both of them, just as Dan had recommended. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of confession settling between them. Finally, Maya spoke. My dad died when I was 20. Heart attack. He was 52. I was in college, trying to prove I could make it in a field that didn't want me. I'd planned this whole thing where I'd go home after graduation and show him everything I'd accomplished. Tell him he was wrong about me. She set down her fork. He died 3 weeks before graduation. Never knew I'd made it. Never knew I'd prove him wrong. And I spent the next 15 years climbing as fast as I could, thinking that if I got high enough, somehow he'd see. Somehow it would matter. Does it? I don't know yet. Maya's smile was sad. Ask me in 10 years. The honesty of it, the willingness to sit in uncertainty, made something in Dan's chest ease. You ask me why I keep inviting you to things, why this matters. Yeah. Because everyone in my life wants something. Partnership deals, promotions, access to the CEO. You wanted a sandwich. No ulterior motive, no networking angle. Just basic human kindness. Do you know how rare that is? I'm not special, Maya. I'm just a guy who knows how to fix cars. You're more than that. And I think you know it. I think that's what scares you. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Dan took another drink of wine, buying time. I saw the job posting on Vanguard's website. Lead EV thermal engineer. Maya went very still. You did? It's exactly my expertise. Everything in that description, battery cooling, thermodynamics, peer-reviewed publications, that's what I used to do. What I was good at. Are you going to apply? No. Why not? Because I can't risk becoming that person again. The one who misses everything important because he's chasing the next deadline. Sophie's stable now. She's happy. I won't trade her well-being for a job title. What if you didn't have to choose? There's always a choice. And I made mine 5 years ago. Maya leaned back, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. What if I told you there might be a way? Flexible hours. Remote work when it makes sense. A company that actually values work-life balance because the CEO learned the hard way what happens when you don't. I'd say that sounds too good to be true. Maybe. Or maybe you've been punishing yourself for so long you've forgotten what possible looks like. The words stung because they were accurate. Dan had built his entire life around atonement, around making sure he never made Amanda's mistake again. never prioritized anything over the people who mattered. But what if Maya was right? What if there was a version of this story where he could be both things, engineer and father, professional and present? Sophie asked me last week why I don't smile when I talk about work anymore. What did you tell her? That I smile about her, that she's what matters. And she said, but you can smile about both things, right? Maya's expression softened. Smart kid. Too smart. She sees through all my excuses. Then maybe stop making them. Before Dan could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Mrs. Chen. Sorry, I need to take this. He stepped outside. The October air bit cold after the restaurant's warmth. Mrs. Chen, everything okay?
Sophie's fine, Daniel, but she wanted me to ask you something.
What?
Whether the lady you're having dinner with is nice, and whether you're smiling.
Dan felt his throat tighten.
Yeah, she's nice. And yeah, I'm smiling. Good. Amanda would be happy. Now go back to your date and stop worrying about us.
It's not a date. Mrs. Chen's laugh was warm.
Sure, Daniel. Whatever you say.
When he came back inside, Maya was on her phone too. She looked up as he approached.
Everything good? Sophie wanted to make sure I was having fun. That's sweet. She also wanted to know if you're my girlfriend.
Maya's cheeks colored slightly.
What did you tell her? That you're a friend? A really good friend.
The disappointment that flickered across Maya's face was so brief, Dan almost missed it. They finished dinner talking about smaller things. Sophie's love of drawing. Maya's mother in Ohio who called every Sunday to ask why she wasn't married yet. The fact that neither of them could cook worth a damn. By the time Maria brought the check, refusing to let either of them pay full price, it was past 9. They walked out to the parking lot together, neither quite ready for the evening to end. Dan. Maya's voice stopped him at his truck. I wasn't completely honest with you earlier about why I wanted to have dinner. The admission made his pulse quicken. I didn't just want to thank you for fixing my car. I wanted to understand you. Because in the week since that morning, I haven't been able to stop thinking about the man who stopped to help and asked for nothing in return. Maya. And I know this is probably completely inappropriate. I know we barely know each other. But I need to ask, would you be willing to come see something? At Vanguard. Just to look. No commitment. No pressure. What kind of something? The EV Development Lab. The project that posting is for. I want to show you what we're building. What you could be part of. Dan should have said no. Should have gotten in his truck and driven home and forgotten about job postings and second chances and women with sharp eyes who saw through his carefully constructed defenses. Instead, he heard himself say, when? Tuesday morning? 10 o'clock. Sophie will be in school. You can tell me no after you see it, but at least you'll have made an informed decision. The logic was sound. The risk was minimal. And something in Maya's expression, hope mixed with determination, made him want to say yes. Okay, Tuesday at 10. Maya's smile could have lit the parking lot. Thank you. For tonight. For being honest. For giving me a chance to show you something. We'll see if you still think this is a good idea after I turn you down. I have a feeling you won't. She climbed into her Audi. Dan watched her drive away, then sat in his truck with the engine running, trying to figure out what he'd just agreed to. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Had a great time tonight. Looking forward to Tuesday. Dan stared at the message for a long moment.
then typed back, "Me too. 6 p.m. at Lucia's was perfect." Her reply came immediately. "Sunday dinners could become a thing, if you want." Dan's thumb hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that getting close to someone meant risking the kind of loss he'd barely survived once. But Sophie's voice echoed in his head. "You can smile about both things, right?" He typed, "I'd like that." When he got home, Mrs. Chen was waiting with Sophie asleep on her couch. "She had a good time. No bad dreams. Thank you for watching her." Mrs. Chen studied his face.
You look lighter, Daniel. Like maybe you remembered how to hope. I don't know about hope, but maybe possibility. That's a start. After Mrs. Chen left, Dan carried Sophie to her bed. She stirred as he tucked her in. "Did you have fun with Maya, Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart, I did." "Is she nice?" "Very nice." "Good." Sophie's eyes drifted closed again. "You deserve nice things." Dan kissed her forehead, his chest tight with emotion. Then he walked to his bedroom and pulled out his laptop. The job posting was still there. Lead EV thermal engineer. Requirements that matched his resume almost perfectly. He read it 3 more times, then opened a new document and started updating his CV for the first time in 5 years. Not to apply, just to see what it would look like. Just to remind himself who he used to be. The words came easier than he expected. Education, Northwestern University, BS Mechanical Engineering. Work experience, Titan Drive Systems, Detroit, Michigan, 2010 to 2017. Lead thermal engineer, powertrain development. Publications, Thermal Dynamics in Hybrid Powertrains, SAE International Journal, 2015, 467 citations. Patents, 12, all related to battery thermal management. He stared at the screen. This person, the one described in these bullet points, felt like a stranger. Someone who'd existed in a different lifetime. Someone who'd believed accomplishment mattered more than presence. Someone who'd learned the hard way which one you couldn't get back. Dan closed the laptop without saving, but he didn't delete the document either. Tuesday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth. Dan dropped Sophie at school, then drove to Schaumburg, his stomach churning with anxiety. Vanguard Automotive's headquarters rose 18 stories of glass and steel, the kind of building that announced ambition before you even walked inside. Dan parked his aging Ford between a Tesla and a Mercedes, feeling acutely out of place. Maya met him in the lobby, professional in the charcoal suit, her hair pulled back. The VP version of herself, rather than the woman who'd eaten lasagna and talked about dead parents. "Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me, I think." She smiled. "Come on. I want to show you something." The elevator required a key card for access to the upper floors. Maya swiped hers and pressed 18. "We're not going to your office?" "No. Somewhere better." The doors opened onto a massive space that took Dan's breath away. The research and development lab stretched the entire floor, 40,000 square feet of workbenches, diagnostic equipment, and prototype vehicles in various states of assembly. Engineers moved between stations, their conversations a mix of technical jargon and creative problem-solving. Dan stopped in the doorway. The smell hit him first. Metal and electronics, and that particular scent of innovation that he'd forgotten he missed. Then the sight of it. Equipment he recognized. Tools he'd used. The organized chaos of people building something that didn't exist yet. His hands itched to touch something, to be part of it. Maya watched his reaction with poorly concealed satisfaction. "This is the EV Development Lab. We're 18 months into a project that's supposed to revolutionize Vanguard's position in the electric market. But we're stuck. On what? The battery integration keeps creating thermal management problems. The powertrain efficiency is below projections. Every solution creates 2 new problems. She led him deeper into the lab. Engineers glanced up, curious about the stranger in street clothes, then went back to their work. Near the center of the space sat a prototype chassis. Dan drifted toward it without conscious thought. His eyes scanned the assembly, cataloging components, identifying connections, seeing problems before anyone pointed them out.
A woman in her 40s approached. Asian American, MIT sweatshirt, carrying a tablet covered in thermal imaging data. Maya, I didn't know we had a visitor scheduled.
Lauren, this is Dan Rivers. Dan, Lauren Chen, our lead engineer. Lauren's expression shifted from confusion to something sharper. Dan Rivers? Wait, Daniel Rivers, who published the Detroit paper on hybrid thermodynamics? Dan blinked. You read that? Read it? I cited it in my dissertation. That paper changed how I think about heat dissipation in compact systems. She turned to Maya. You didn't tell me you were bringing in a consultant. I wanted to see if he'd be interested first. Lauren turned back to Dan with undisguised excitement. If you want fresh eyes on our integration problem, start here. She pulled up schematics on a large monitor, battery pack diagrams overlaid with temperature gradients. We're getting thermal spikes during rapid charging cycles.
Peaks hitting 110 Celsius, when safe limits are 85. Every cooling solution we've tried either adds too much weight or creates new failure points. Dan studied the schematic in silence. His brain shifted into a gear he hadn't used in years, patterns emerging from chaos, solutions crystallizing from scattered data. After 60 seconds, he pointed to a section of the design. You're routing the coolant flow wrong. See here. You're fighting the natural heat distribution instead of working with it. If you reverse this path and add a buffer chamber here, you'd reduce peak temperature by at least 18% without adding weight. Lauren's eyes widened. That's actually brilliant. Why didn't we see that? Because you've been staring at this design for months. You see what you expect to see instead of what's actually there. He looked uncomfortable with the attention. It's an easy fix. Any competent engineer would spot it eventually. We've had 6 competent engineers looking at this for 14 months. Lauren's voice carried absolute sincerity. You saw it in 60 seconds. Before Dan could respond, a man in an expensive suit appeared. Late 50s, silver hair, the kind of presence that announced executive authority. Mr. Rivers. Robert Kensington's voice carried the confidence of someone who'd built empires. I've heard interesting things about you. Walk me through your solution. The next 20 minutes felt surreal. Dan explaining thermal dynamics to a CEO and lead engineer, fielding sharp questions, defending his analysis with the kind of technical depth he'd forgotten he possessed. Robert listened with the focus of someone who knew how to identify value. When Dan finished, Robert nodded slowly. Mr. Rivers, I'd like to offer you a consulting contract. 3 months, part-time. Work from home when possible, on-site as needed. We'll pay consultant rates, $180 an hour. If it works out, we discuss something more permanent. If not, you walk away with 40,000 plus and experience to leverage elsewhere. The numbers made Dan's head spin. 180 an hour was more than he made in a week doing odd jobs. I have a daughter. She's 8. She's my first priority, non-negotiable. Robert's expression didn't change. I have 3 grown children, Mr. Rivers. I remember what it's like trying to balance career and family. I won't pretend we're perfect at accommodating parents, but I will commit to making this work if you're willing to try. Dan looked at Maya. She stood apart from the conversation, letting him make this decision without pressure. But her eyes held hope. I need to talk to Sophie. Can I give you an answer Monday? Absolutely. Robert extended his hand. Dan shook it, feeling the weight of possibility settle on his shoulders. After Robert left, Lauren pulled Dan aside. Whatever Maya's paying you to consider this, it's not enough.
We need you on this project.
I haven't said yes yet. You will. Because you're an engineer, and we just showed you a problem you can solve. That's catnip for people like us. Dan wanted to argue, but she was right. Standing in that lab, seeing the prototype, understanding the challenge, something had woken up inside him. Something he'd tried to bury for 5 years. Maya walked him back to the elevator. Well, that was manipulative. Completely. Maya didn't look remotely sorry. Did it work? I don't know yet. Dan pressed the button for the ground floor. I need to make sure this is right for Sophie before it's right for me. That's why you'll be good at this. Because you understand what matters. Or why I'll fail. Because I can't give 100% when 50% belongs to an 8-year-old. The doors slid open. Dan stepped inside, then turned back. Can I ask you something? Anything.
Why does this matter so much to you?
It's not just about finding the right person for the job. Maya held his gaze. Because when you stopped on that highway, you reminded me that there are still people who help without expecting anything in return, who see a problem and solve it because that's who they are. You've become someone I look forward to talking to, someone real in a world that feels increasingly fake. She paused. If I can give you back even a fraction of what you gave me, a chance to use your gifts, to feel valuable, to build something while still being the father Sophie needs, then yeah, it matters. Because you matter to me, as a friend. The word friend hung in the air between them, not quite fitting the charge Dan felt. I'll call you Monday. Either way. Either way. The elevator doors closed. Dan stood alone in the descending car, his reflection staring back from the polished steel. He looked different somehow. Lighter, like a weight he'd been carrying had shifted just enough to let him breathe. Saturday afternoon, Dan and Sophie sat at their kitchen table making tacos. She was in charge of cheese, her favorite job because it involved the most eating along the way. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always, sweetheart. If you could do any job in the world, what would it be? The question caught him off guard. Why do you ask? Sophie shrugged with studied casualness. Mrs. Chen said you used to do something important before Mommy got sick, and I was wondering what it was. Dan set down the spatula. I was an engineer. I designed systems that kept car engines from getting too hot. It was good work. I was good at it. How come you stopped? Because I was working so much I wasn't home enough. And when Mommy got sick, I wasn't there to help her. So I decided being with you was more important than any job. Sophie considered this with the seriousness she brought to big questions.
But what if you could do both? Be home with me and do the important work? Dan's chest tightened. Is that what you want? I want you to be happy, Daddy. You've been sad for a long time. I miss when you used to get excited about things. The observation landed like a physical blow. He'd thought he'd been hiding it. Thought he'd done a good job pretending everything was fine. But Sophie had always been too smart for her own good. If I told you someone offered me a job doing that kind of work again, what would you think? Sophie's face lit up. Really? What kind of job?
designing cooling systems for electric cars, working with really smart people to solve hard problems. But it would mean I might work more hours sometimes. Not like before. I'd still pick you up from school and have dinner with you and read stories at night. But maybe some evenings I'd need to work after you go to bed. Would it make you smile again? The simplicity of the question undid him. Yeah, sweetheart, I think it might. Then you should do it. Just like that? Sophie nodded firmly. Mommy wouldn't want you to be sad forever. She'd want you to be happy. How do you know that? Because that's what love means. Wanting the person to be happy even when you're not there anymore. Dan pulled Sophie into a hug, his eyes burning. When did you get so wise? I'm 8. I've been wise forever. That night, after Sophie went to sleep, Dan opened his laptop and pulled up the email draft he'd been working on since Tuesday. Mr. Kensington, thank you for the opportunity you presented on Tuesday. After careful consideration and discussion with my daughter, I'd like to accept your consulting offer. I want to be clear about my parameters. I will work 9 to 3:30 Monday through Friday, with flexibility for remote work when Sophie needs me. I will not miss school events or doctor appointments.
And if at any point this arrangement stops working for my daughter, I reserve the right to walk away without penalty. If these terms are acceptable, I'm ready to start whenever you need me. Respectfully, Daniel Rivers. He read it 3 times, then hit send before he could second-guess himself. The reply came 15 minutes later. Mr. Rivers, your terms are not just acceptable, they're admirable. Report Monday at 9. We'll have your workstation ready. Looking forward to working with you. Robert Kensington. Dan stared at the email, then pulled out his phone and texted Maya. I said yes. Her response was immediate. I knew you would. Welcome to Vanguard. A pause, then another message. This is going to be good, Dan. I promise. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that this time would be different, that he could be both engineer and father without sacrificing one for the other. But the ghost of Amanda's last words haunted him. Don't work like that anymore.
Sophie needs you more than you think. He'd made her a promise in those final hours, and he'd kept it for 5 years. The question was whether he could keep it while also becoming the person he used to be. Or whether Maya was right, whether there was a version of success that didn't require sacrifice, a version where you could smile about both things. Dan closed his laptop and checked on Sophie one more time. She slept peacefully, her breathing soft and even, her drawings taped to the walls around her bed. Dragons and castles, and one that showed the 3 of them together, whole. He'd do anything to keep her safe, to keep her happy, to make sure she never felt the way he'd felt when Amanda died, like the people you loved could vanish while you weren't paying attention. But maybe Sophie was right. Maybe being happy didn't mean choosing between love and work. Maybe it meant finding a way to honor both. Monday morning, Dan dropped Sophie at school and drove to Vanguard. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Lauren met him in the lobby with a security badge already printed. Your workstation is set up. Corner of the lab. Quiet spot. 2 monitors, full software suite, coffee machine nearby. She grinned. Maya made sure you'd have everything you need. Speaking of Maya, she's in meetings all morning. But she wanted me to tell you, breathe. You've got this. The first week passed in a blur. Dan fell into rhythms he'd forgotten. Morning stand-ups with the engineering team, technical reviews of battery integration designs, late morning calls with suppliers about component specifications. But he also kept his boundaries. 3:30 every day he left. Picked up Sophie, made dinner, helped with homework, read stories until she fell asleep,
Then, and only then, did he open his laptop for another hour or two of design work. Lauren noticed. "You're the only person I know who actually logs off at 3:30. Sophie needs me home."
Most people would say the work needs them more. Most people haven't watched their wife die while their 3-year-old called for help. The words came out harsher than he intended, but Lauren just nodded. Fair enough. For what it's worth, you're getting more done in 6 hours than most of my team does in 10. Because I don't have time to waste. By the end of week 2, Dan had redesigned the entire thermal management system, cut projected cooling costs by $340 per vehicle, made the prototype actually work. Robert called him into his office Friday afternoon. "Your contract was for 3 months of consulting." Dan's stomach dropped. "I know my hours are limited, but I'm not firing you." Robert's smile was genuine. "I'm offering you a full-time position. Chief Technical Officer of EV Development. Salary $175,000. Benefits, stock options, the works." Dan couldn't breathe. "But here's the thing. This comes with more responsibility, more visibility, more hours than you're working now." Robert leaned back in his chair. "So I need to know, can you handle this? Can you lead a team, attend board meetings, represent Vanguard at conferences, all while maintaining those boundaries you said?" "I don't know." The honesty seemed to surprise Robert. "I want to say yes. I want to believe I can do both. But I failed at this once before, and the cost was everything that mattered." "Then let me tell you something about failure." Robert pulled out his phone, showed Dan a photo. 3 kids, various ages, all smiling. "I missed my daughter's high school graduation because of a merger negotiation. Missed my son's wedding rehearsal because of a board crisis. Spent 30 years telling myself work came first and my family would understand." He set down the phone. "My wife almost left me in 2008. Packed her bags and everything. Told me I could have the company or I could have her, but I couldn't have both." "What did you do?" "Chose her. Restructured my entire schedule. Started leaving at 5. Stopped working weekends. And you know what happened? The company fell apart. We had our most profitable year on record. Turns out when you're not exhausted and resentful, you make better decisions." Robert met Dan's eyes. "I'm not asking you to sacrifice your daughter. I'm asking you to show my company that excellence and balance aren't mutually exclusive. That we can build world-class products without destroying the people who build them." Dan felt something in his chest crack open. "I'll need flexibility. Remote work when Sophie's sick. Permission to leave for school events. No expectation of nights and weekends unless absolutely critical. Done. And if I start slipping, if Sophie shows signs of stress, I need your word I can pull back without penalty." "You have it." Dan took a breath. "Then okay. Yes, I accept." Robert stood, extended his hand. "Welcome to Vanguard, Mr. Rivers. Now go home and tell your daughter. Her dad just became a CTO." When Dan picked up Sophie that afternoon, he was grinning. "Good day, Daddy?" "Really good day, sweetheart. How would you feel about going out for pizza tonight? To celebrate?" "What are we celebrating?" "Your dad just got the kind of job Mommy would be proud of. The kind where I get to build important things and still be home for dinner." Sophie threw her arms around his neck. "I knew you could do both things." "Yeah, kiddo. Turns out you were right." That night, after pizza and ice cream and Sophie finally falling asleep exhausted from excitement, Dan texted Maya.
Robert offered me CTO. I said yes. Her response came immediately. I know. He told me this afternoon. I may have happy cried in my office. Then, dinner Sunday? We should celebrate. Dan stared at the text. Sunday dinners were becoming a thing, a pattern, something that felt dangerously close to dating. He typed back, Lucia's at 6? Perfect. He set down the phone, his heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with career advancement, and everything to do with a woman who'd seen past his defenses to the person he'd forgotten he could be. Sophie was right. You could smile about both things. The question was whether Dan was ready to risk his heart the way he'd just risked his career. The first month as CTO passed in a controlled burn. Dan arrived at 9, left at 3:30, and somehow accomplished more in those hours than most of his team managed in full days. Lauren joked that desperation made him efficient. The truth was simpler. When you only had 6 hours, you couldn't afford to waste 15 minutes on office politics or an hour on meetings that should have been emails. But Sunday dinners at Lucia's became the fixed point around which everything else rotated. Week 3, Maya told him about the promotion she'd accepted, Vice President of EV Division, effective January 1st. Week 4, Dan brought Sophie along, and Maya spent 2 hours teaching her how to fold napkins into swans while Maria watched with undisguised approval. Week 5, they stayed until closing, talking about everything except work, and when Dan walked Maya to her car, the space between them felt charged with something neither was ready to name. Week 6. Everything changed.
Marcus Torres cornered Dan in the parking garage on a Tuesday evening. VP of Manufacturing, 48 years old, the kind of corporate climber who viewed every colleague as either a stepping stone or an obstacle. Rivers, we should talk. Dan had been heading home, already running 5 minutes late for Sophie's school concert. I've got somewhere to be. This won't take long. Marcus leaned against Dan's truck, blocking the driver's door. I'm curious about something. You've been here 6 weeks, consultant to CTO in record time. That's impressive. The word came out like an insult. Robert saw value in my work. Or maybe he saw value in keeping Maya Hartford happy. Everyone knows you two are close. Very close. Dan's jaw tightened. We're colleagues. Friends. Sure. That's why she pushed Robert to create a position that didn't exist 3 months ago. That's why she restructured the entire reporting chain so you don't answer to anyone except her. That's not... Marcus smiled without warmth. I'm not judging. Smart move, actually. Find the right person, get them emotionally invested, ride their coattails to the top. I respect the hustle. Dan's hands clenched into fists. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? 6-week consultant becomes CTO. Woman who hired him gets promoted to VP. Both of them conveniently single. Spending every Sunday at the same restaurant. You do the math. If you have a problem with my work, take it to Robert. Oh, I plan to. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Some of us are watching. Some of us remember when promotions were based on merit instead of who you're sleeping with. Marcus walked away before Dan could respond. Left him standing in the parking garage, fury and shame churning in his gut. The worst part was the seed of doubt Marcus had planted. Had Maya created this position for him? Had she manipulated Robert into promoting both of them? Was everything between them built on professional ambition rather than genuine connection? Dan drove to Sophie's school in a fog. Made it just in time to see her sing in the 3rd grade chorus. She spotted him in the audience and waved, her face lighting up. That smile anchored him, reminded him what mattered. After the concert, they got ice cream despite the November cold. Did you like my song, Daddy?
You were the best one up there. You have to say that. You're my dad.
Doesn't make it less true.
Sophie twirled her spoon in chocolate chip. Can I ask you something?
Always.
Do you love Maya? The question hit like a punch to the solar plexus.
Where did that come from?
You smile different when you talk about her. Like how you used to smile when you talked about Mommy. Dan set down his cup, buying time.
Maya is my friend. And my boss, kind of. It's complicated.
Mrs.
Chen says complicated is what grown-ups call it when they're scared to be happy.
Mrs. Chen talks too much. Sophie giggled. But she's right though, isn't she? Dan looked at his daughter, 8 years old and somehow wiser than he'd ever be. Yes, sweetheart. She's probably right. That night after Sophie went to bed, Dan's phone rang. Maya.
Hey, you sound weird. Everything okay?
Her voice carried concern. He'd texted her after the concert, just a quick update that he'd made it on time. But apparently she could read his mood even through messages. Marcus cornered me today. A pause.
What did he say?
Dan relayed the conversation, heard Maya's sharp intake of breath. That manipulative son of a... He's not entirely wrong though, is he? You did push for my position. You did restructure reporting chains. Because you're the best person for the job. Because this company needed someone with your expertise. Not because we're friends. But we are friends. More than friends, maybe.
And that complicates things. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Maya spoke, her voice careful. Are you asking if I have feelings for you beyond professional respect? I guess I am. Yes, I do. I have for weeks. Maybe since that first dinner at Lucia's when you told me about Amanda, and I realized you were the most genuinely good person I'd met in years. Another pause. But I didn't create your position because of that. I created it because Loring showed me your thermal redesign, and I knew we'd be idiots not to lock you down. Robert agreed. The promotion came from your work, not from me. Dan exhaled slowly. Marcus is going to make this a problem. He all but said he's going to the board. Let him. Your work speaks for itself. The prototype efficiency gains alone justify your salary 10 times over. But if he makes it about us, then we deal with it. Together. The certainty in her voice steadied him. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. If there wasn't anything between us, if we were just colleagues, would you still have offered me this job? Without hesitation, yes. How can you be sure? Because I showed your redesign to 3 other senior engineers before I ever talked to Robert. All 3 said the same thing. Whoever designed this is operating at a level we don't have in-house. This was a business decision that happened to involve someone I care about. The caring came after, not before. Dan felt something in his chest unknot. I'm falling for you. He heard himself say it before he could stop. And that terrifies me because the last time I let work and personal life mix, I lost everything. We're not mixing them. We're keeping them separate. I'm not your boss, Lauren is. We don't work directly together, and we're both adults who can maintain professional boundaries. She paused. But Dan, if this is too much, if being at Vanguard means we can't explore what's happening between us, then I need to know. Because I won't let my feelings compromise your career. Or Sophie's stability. The fact that she put Sophie first, without hesitation, told him everything he needed to know. I don't want to choose. I want to figure out how to do both. Then we figure it out, together. After they hung up, Dan sat in the quiet of his living room, processing. He was falling in love with Maya Hartford, had been since she'd looked at him across a table at Lucia's and asked him to be honest about his pain. Since she'd understood that his daughter came first and never questioned it. Since she'd seen the engineer he used to be and believed he could be that person again without sacrificing the father he'd become. The question was whether Vanguard, whether Marcus and the board and corporate politics would let them have both. Thursday morning, Dan arrived to find a meeting request from Robert. No subject line, no context, just, "My office, 8:30 a.m." His stomach dropped.
Maya was already there when he arrived, her expression tight. Marcus sat across from Robert's desk, looking smug. Robert gestured for Dan to sit. "We have a situation that needs addressing. Marcus has raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest regarding recent promotions." Dan's pulse hammered. "Specifically, he believes that Ms. Hartford's relationship with you may have influenced both your hiring and her advancement to VP. That's not," Maya started. Robert held up a hand. "I'm going to say this once, and I want everyone in this room to hear it clearly. Daniel Rivers was hired because his technical expertise solved a 14-month problem in 60 seconds. His promotion to CTO was approved by me and the board based solely on measurable results, cost savings, efficiency gains, and timeline acceleration." He looked at Marcus. "Ms. Hartford's promotion to VP was in development 6 months before she ever met Mr. Rivers.
Her division has exceeded targets for 3 consecutive quarters. Her Titan Cell partnership is projected to increase revenue by 18% next fiscal year. She earned that position." Marcus shifted. "But their personal relationship is none of this company's business as long as it doesn't affect their work. And since Mr. Rivers reports to Mrs. Chen, not Mrs. Hartford, there is no direct supervisory conflict." Robert leaned forward. "What I will not tolerate is baseless accusations designed to undermine 2 of my best people. If you have evidence of actual misconduct, present it. If not, this conversation is over." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Just wanted to ensure we're maintaining standards. We are. You're dismissed." After Marcus left, Robert turned to Dan and Maya. "He's going to be a problem." "I know." Maya's voice was steady. "He's been angling for VP of operations for 2 years. Watching me get promoted instead broke something in him. The board is aware of his tendencies." But he's good at manufacturing doubt. So I need you both to be careful. No appearance of impropriety, no ammunition for him to use." Robert's gaze settled on Dan. "That means no more Sunday dinners at the same restaurant. No arriving or leaving together. Nothing that could be photographed and misconstrued. We're not doing anything wrong. I know. But perception matters. And right now, you need to be beyond reproach." After they left Robert's office, Maya grabbed Dan's arm. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful." "Stop." Dan kept his voice low. "We didn't do anything wrong. We're allowed to be friends. Allowed to have dinner. But he's right about optics. We need to be smart." "So what does that mean?" "It means we stop seeing each other outside work, at least until this blows over." The words hit harder than they should have. "For how long?" "I don't know. A few months, maybe. Long enough for Marcus to find a new target." Dan felt something inside him rebel against the unfairness of it. But they had to hide genuine connection because one bitter executive couldn't handle their success. "What if I don't want to wait?" Maya's expression softened. "Then we make a choice. We can keep seeing each other and give Marcus the ammunition he wants. Or we can be patient and protect what we're building.
both professionally and personally. She touched his hand briefly. I vote for patience, because I don't want to lose you, and I don't want you to lose this job. December arrived with early snow and a workload that kept Dan busy enough to almost forget about the forced distance between him and Maya. They were professional at work, polite, colleagues who respected each other and nothing more. It was slowly killing him. Sophie noticed at dinner one Thursday. You haven't talked about Maya in 2 weeks. We're both busy with work. You're sad again. I'm not sad, sweetheart. Yes, you are.
You get the same look you had before, like you're trying to be happy, but forgot how. Dan set down his fork. Sometimes grown-up stuff is complicated. Is it the mean man at work? The one you told Mrs. Chen about? Dan hadn't realized Sophie had overheard that conversation. Yeah, he's making things difficult. Does Maya know you miss her? The directness of the question caught him off guard. I think so. Then why don't you tell her? Because sometimes the right thing to do is wait. Waiting is hard. Yeah, kiddo. It really is. That night, Dan broke his own rule and texted Maya. Sophie says I'm sad again. She's not wrong. The response came 15 minutes later. Me too. This is harder than I thought it would be. How much longer? Robert says Marcus is building a case, trying to find proof that your hiring was nepotism. We need to give him nothing. And if he doesn't stop, then we make a different choice. But let's give it until Christmas at least. Dan stared at the message. Christmas was 3 weeks away. 3 more weeks of pretending Maya was just a colleague. 3 more weeks of Sophie asking why he looked sad. Okay, until Christmas. Her final message came an hour later, after he'd already gone to bed. For what it's worth, you're the best thing that's happened to me in 5 years. I can wait if it means not losing you. Dan read it 3 times before sleep finally came. The prototype demonstration was scheduled for December 20th, 3 weeks before production launch. Investors, board members, automotive press, everyone who mattered would be there. Dan had spent 2 months preparing. The thermal management system was flawless. Battery efficiency exceeded projections by 12%. Charging times beat industry standards. It was going to work. It had to. The morning of the demonstration, Dan dropped Sophie at school and headed to Vanguard. Found Lauren in the lab doing final checks. We're good. She looked up from her tablet.
Better than good. This is going to blow their minds. If it works.
It'll work. Your math doesn't lie. The demonstration started at 10. Robert opened with context, Vanguard's pivot to electric vehicles, the Titan Cell partnership, the aggressive timeline. Then he handed it to Maya. She commanded the room in a way that made Dan's chest tight. Professional. Brilliant. Explaining the business case with the kind of clarity that left no room for doubt. Then it was his turn. Dan had never enjoyed public speaking, but talking about thermal dynamics, about elegant solutions to complex problems, that felt natural. He walked the audience through the design, explained the innovations, fielded technical questions with the kind of depth that came from living inside a problem for months. When he finished, the room was silent for 3 beats. Then applause. The prototype test came next. Live demonstration, full rapid charge cycle, thermal sensors broadcasting real-time data to the screen.
Dan watched the numbers climb.
65 Celsius. 70. 75. The system was working exactly as designed, distributing heat, managing flow, keeping everything below critical thresholds. 80. 82. Holding steady. The charge completed. Peak temperature,
83 Celsius, 2 degrees below the safety limit. Perfect. The room erupted. Investors were already pulling out phones, press asking for interviews, board members congratulating Robert. Maya caught Dan's eye from across the room. Her smile could have lit the city. Later, after the crowd dispersed, Robert found them in the lab. That was exceptional work, both of you. He glanced around, making sure they were alone. The board just approved full production. We're launching in March, and they want both of you at the Investor Roadshow in January, New York, Boston, San Francisco. Dan's mind raced. Multi-city roadshow meant hotels, dinners, extended time together.
Exactly the kind of thing Marcus would weaponize. Robert seemed to read his thoughts. Marcus submitted his complaint to HR this morning. Formal accusation of preferential treatment and inappropriate relationship. Maya's face went pale. The investigation will take 4 to 6 weeks. During that time, I need you both to maintain absolute professional distance. No contact outside work-related communication. No joint appearances that aren't required. Nothing that could be misinterpreted. He paused. I'm sorry. I know this isn't fair, but if you want to keep your positions, this is how it has to be. After Robert left, Dan and Maya stood in the empty lab, 3 feet apart, the distance between them feeling like miles. This is killing me. Maya's voice cracked. Watching you present today, seeing you in your element, I wanted to tell everyone in that room that you're mine, that I'm proud of you. But you can't. Not for 6 more weeks. Dan took a breath. After the investigation clears us, and it will clear us because we haven't done anything wrong, I want to take you on an actual date, not a professional dinner, not hiding at Lucia's. A real date where we don't have to pretend we're just friends. Maya's eyes shone. I'd like that. Until then, we wait. Christmas came and went. Dan and Sophie spent it with Amanda's parents in Naperville, a bittersweet tradition that honored the past while acknowledging the present. Linda Chen had aged in the 5 years since her daughter died, but she still made Sophie's favorite dumplings and told stories about Amanda's childhood. On Christmas night, after Sophie went to bed, Linda pulled Dan aside. You look different. Different how? Lighter. Like you're not carrying quite so much weight. Dan thought about Maya, about the job that had given him purpose again, about Sophie telling him he could smile about both things. I think I'm remembering how to hope. Linda's eyes missed. Amanda would want that. She always said you deserved happiness, even if she couldn't be here to share it.
Did she really? In those last days, all she talked about was you and Sophie, how much she loved you both, how sorry she was that she was leaving, how you deserved to find love again someday. Linda squeezed his hand. So if you found someone, and I think maybe you have, don't let guilt stop you. Don't let fear win. Amanda wouldn't want that. The word settled something in Dan's chest that had been restless for years. Thank you. The HR investigation concluded on January 15th. Dan was at his desk when the email came. After thorough review of all evidence and testimony, we find no basis for the allegations raised. Daniel Rivers was hired and promoted based solely on professional qualifications and work performance. Maya Hartford's advancement followed established protocols and was approved before any personal relationship developed. Case closed.
Dan's phone rang immediately. Maya. You saw? Just now. We're clear.
Her laugh sounded like relief and joy mixed together. We're clear. So about that date. Tonight? I can get Mrs. Chen to watch Sophie. Tonight.
They met at a steakhouse in downtown Chicago. Not Lucia's, not anywhere they'd been before. Somewhere new, somewhere that was just theirs. Maya wore a dress, dark green silk that made Dan's mouth go dry. He'd bought a new shirt, gotten a haircut, felt like a teenager on prom night. This feels surreal. Maya smiled across the table. Being here with you. Not having to hide. Good surreal or bad surreal? The best surreal. They talked through dinner about everything and nothing. Sophie's latest drawing, a dragon protecting a castle. Maya's mother calling to ask for the 4th time when she'd provide grandchildren. The Investor Roadshow scheduled for next month. Plans for the production launch in March.
After dinner, they walked along the Chicago River, bundled against January cold. Maya's hand found Dan's, their fingers lacing together. I need to tell you something. Dan stopped walking. And I need to say it now, before I lose my nerve. Okay. I'm in love with you. Not just falling anymore. Fully, completely in love. With your brilliance and your dedication to Sophie and the way you see problems no one else can solve. With your kindness and your grief and your courage to try again even though you're terrified. He cupped her face in his hands. And I know it's only been 3 months. I know that's fast. But I also know what it feels like to waste time. To put off important things because you think you'll have more chances. And I don't want to waste another second pretending this isn't real. Maya's eyes shone with tears. I love you too. I've loved you since you told me about Amanda, and I saw how much you were capable of loving. I want to be part of your life, Dan.
Part of Sophie's life, if she'll let me. I want to build something with you that honors everything you've been through, while also being new. She kissed him then, soft and sure, and Dan felt 5 years of careful distance finally collapse. When they broke apart, Maya was smiling through tears.
So where do we go from here? We take it slow. We let Sophie set the pace. We keep being smart about work. But we stop pretending we're just colleagues who happen to eat dinner together. Deal. They walked back to their cars holding hands, and when Dan drove home he felt lighter than he had in years, like he'd finally given himself permission to want something beyond survival. Sophie was still awake when he got back, reading in bed. How was your date? It was perfect. Did you kiss her? Dan laughed. That's a very personal question. You did. Sophie bounced on the bed. I knew it. Mrs. Chen owes me $5. You bet Mrs. Chen on whether I'd kiss Maya? She said you were too scared.
I said you were brave. Dan sat on the edge of Sophie's bed. How would you feel if Maya became more than just my friend? If she was around more often?
Sophie considered this seriously. Would she be like a new mom? No one could ever replace your mom. But she might become part of our family in a different way, if that's okay with you. Do you love her? Yeah, kiddo, I do. And she makes you happy? So happy. Then it's okay with me. Just like that? Sophie shrugged. You've been sad for so long, Daddy. I just want you to smile again. Dan pulled her into a hug, his throat tight. When did you get so wise? I told you. I've been wise forever. February brought the Investor Roadshow, 5 cities in 7 days. Maya and Dan maintained professional distance during presentations, but the evenings were theirs. Room service dinners in Boston, walking through Golden Gate Park in San Francisco.
Talking until 3 a.m. in a New York hotel about dreams and fears and the future they were building. The last night, in a Chicago hotel, despite being 20 minutes from home, Maya asked the question that had been building between them. Where do you see this going? Us, I mean. Dan set down his wine glass. Honestly, I see Sunday dinners at Lucia's with you and Sophie. I see you teaching her more origami. I see us figuring out how to blend our lives without losing what makes each of them work. He paused. I see waking up next to you someday. Maybe not tomorrow, but someday when Sophie's ready, and we're ready, and it feels like the natural next step. Maya's smile was radiant. I see that too. All of it. And the work stuff? That doesn't scare you? It terrifies me. But you're worth being terrified for. March 10th, the first production vehicle rolled off the assembly line in Tennessee. Dan and Maya flew down for the ceremony, along with Robert and half the board. The car gleamed under showroom lights. Sleek, efficient, powered by the system Dan had designed. Robert shook Dan's hand. You did this. We did this. Dan gestured to the team of engineers watching. Lauren and her people executed the vision, but it was your vision, your breakthrough. Detroit taught you well. Detroit taught me a lot of things, some of them painful. Robert's expression turned serious. I heard Marcus put in his resignation this morning, taking a position with a competitor. Good riddance. Agreed. But Dan, his complaint, even though it was baseless, raised legitimate questions about how we handle relationships between executives. HR is drafting new policies. Dan's stomach tightened. What kind of policies? Nothing that affects you and Maya. You're in different divisions, different reporting structures. But moving forward, we're requiring disclosure of relationships that could create conflicts. Just formality, but you should know. We'll disclose whatever you need. After Robert walked away, Maya slipped her hand into Dan's. That didn't sound ominous at all. We knew this wouldn't be simple. I know. But looking at what we built, the car, the team, us, I think complicated is worth it. Yeah. Dan pulled her close, not caring who saw. It really is. That night, back in Chicago, Dan picked up Sophie from Amanda's parents. Linda hugged him at the door. We saw the news. The car is beautiful. Thanks to Dan's work. James Chen appeared behind his wife. Amanda would be so proud. The words hit unexpectedly hard. You think so? I know so. You honored her by becoming the father Sophie needed. But you also honored the man she fell in love with, the engineer who saw possibilities everywhere. She'd want you to be both. Linda added, and she'd want you to be happy, with Maya or whoever makes your heart feel alive again. The permission he'd been seeking, not from them, but from the memory of Amanda herself, finally felt real. April brought warmth and the first hint of possibility. Production ramped up to 500 units a week. Pre-orders exceeded 50,000. Automotive press called the thermal system revolutionary. And Dan found a rhythm that actually worked. Mornings with Sophie, days at Vanguard, evenings split between family time and stolen hours with Maya. Sunday dinners expanded to include Sophie, who'd taken to calling Maya her bonus person instead of trying to label what she was. One Sunday in late April, after dinner at Lucia's, Maya asked if she could talk to Sophie alone. Dan's heart raced, but he nodded. They walked to the small park next to the restaurant. Dan watched from the parking lot as they sat on swings, talking. Sophie was laughing. Maya was smiling. They looked like they belonged together. When they came back, Sophie ran to Dan. Maya wants to take me to the art museum next Saturday. Can I go? Of course. Sophie lowered her voice to a whisper. She also asked if it would be okay if she loved both of us. I said yes.
Dan's eyes burned. That was very wise, sweetheart.
After Sophie ran back to Maria for cookies, Maya approached carefully.
I hope that was okay.
Asking her directly. It was perfect.
I don't want to push too fast, but I also don't want to waste time. Life's too short to pretend we're not building something real.
Dan pulled her close. You're right. Life's too short. He kissed her there in the parking lot of Lucia's, with Sophie watching through the window and Maria probably making plans for their wedding already. Kissed her like she was oxygen and possibility and hope all rolled into one person. When they broke apart, Maya was crying. Happy tears. Just happy. Me too. May arrived with Sophie's 9th birthday.
They celebrated at the apartment. Small party with school friends, cake from Sophie's favorite bakery, presents that included art supplies and books, and a necklace from Maya with a tiny dragon pendant. Later, after the friends went home and Sophie crashed from sugar overload, Maya helped Dan clean up. Thank you for including me today. You're part of this now. Part of us. Maya set down the plates she'd been washing. I need to tell you something. The seriousness in her tone made Dan's pulse spike. The board wants me to relocate. 6 months in California to oversee the West Coast expansion. They're opening a new facility in Palo Alto. Dan felt the floor shift under him. When? June 1st. I can decline, but it's a massive opportunity. Career-defining. Then you should take it. The words came out automatic, even as his heart was screaming the opposite. Dan, 6 months isn't forever. And this is your dream. I won't be the reason you don't chase it. What about us? We'll figure it out. FaceTime, weekend visits. It's not ideal, but it's doable. Maya looked at him like she was searching for cracks in his certainty. You mean that? I do. You took a chance on me when I was broken and hiding. You gave me back the parts of myself I thought I'd lost. If you need 6 months to build something incredible, I'll be here when you get back. Her kiss tasted like salt and promise. I love you. I love you too. June 1st came too fast. Dan and Sophie drove Maya to O'Hare, helped her check bags, stood in the terminal like thousands of other people saying temporary goodbyes. Sophie hugged Maya first. You better FaceTime me every day. Every single day. Maya crouched to eye level. And I expect new drawings to show me. Deal. Then it was Dan's turn. He held her for a long moment, breathing in her perfume, memorizing the feel of her. 6 months. 6 months. Then I'm coming home. To you. We'll be here. Dan. Yeah? Thank you for believing I can do both. That I can have the career and have you. You taught me that, remember? That you can smile about both things. After she disappeared through security, Sophie took Dan's hand. She's coming back, right? Absolutely. You promise? I promise. The first month was hard. FaceTime calls every night helped, but Sophie still cried sometimes because Maya wasn't there for Sunday dinners. Dan threw himself into work, managing the production scale-up, solving problems as they emerged. But the apartment felt empty in ways it hadn't before Maya. Like she'd carved out a space in their lives that couldn't be filled by anyone else. July brought a surprise. Maya flew home for a long weekend, just 3 days, but enough. They spent Saturday at the zoo with Sophie, Sunday at Lucia's, and Sunday night alone for the first time in weeks. I hate being away from you, Maya curled against him on her hotel room couch. This opportunity is amazing, but coming home feels like I can finally breathe again. 2 more months, I know. And the California facility is incredible. We're doing things that will change the industry. But God, I miss you. Dan kissed her forehead. 4 more months after this. We can do 4 months. August was harder. Sophie started 4th grade without Maya there for the first day photos. September brought Sophie's first school play. She had 2 lines as Tree Number 3, and Maya watched via FaceTime but cried because she couldn't be there in person. October brought the call that changed everything. Dan was making dinner when his phone rang. Maya's name lit the screen. Hey, I wasn't expecting. The California board approved permanent relocation. They want me to stay, run the West Coast division long term. Dan's hand froze on the spatula. What did you tell them? That I needed to talk to you first? Silence stretched between them. 3,000 miles of fiber optic cable carrying the weight of impossible choices. This is your career, Maya. If this is what you want, it's not what I want. Her voice broke. I want to be in Chicago with you and Sophie. I want Sunday dinners and school plays and waking up next to you. But they're offering me executive VP, a seat on the executive board. It's everything I've worked for. Then take it. Dan, I mean it. You've earned this, and I won't be the reason you don't accept. What about us? We'll figure it out. Maybe Sophie and I could move. Your entire life is in Chicago. Amanda's family, Sophie's school, your job. There are jobs in California. Not like the one you have. Not where you're building the future of electric vehicles. Maya was crying now. Dan could hear it. I don't want to choose. I know. But I think I have to. Dan closed his eyes, the kitchen blurring. Then choose the career. Because I will always be here. 6 months or 6 years. When you're ready to come home, we'll be waiting. That's not fair to you. Life isn't fair, Maya, but it's what we've got. They talked for another hour, cried together, tried to figure out if there was a path that didn't involve sacrifice. There wasn't. Maya declined the California position on October 15th and gave her notice, 4 weeks to transition her role. She'd be home by Thanksgiving. When Dan found out, he called her immediately. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Because I finally understand what you've been trying to teach me. Success isn't measured in job titles or quarterly reports. It's measured in the people you love and the life you build with them. Her voice steadied. Detroit taught you to build engines. Chicago taught you to build a life. You taught me that I could have both, but only if I'm willing to fight for what matters. And I matter? You and Sophie matter more than any executive position ever could. Dan felt tears streaming down his face. Come home. I am. I'm coming home. Thanksgiving arrived with Maya's Audi pulling up outside Dan's apartment at 6 p.m. Sophie was out the door before the car stopped moving, launching herself at Maya with the kind of enthusiasm that nearly knocked them both over. Dan stood in the doorway watching them, his daughter and the woman he loved, and felt complete in a way he hadn't since Amanda died. That night, after Sophie finally fell asleep, Maya and Dan sat on his couch, talking until dawn. I have a question. Maya's voice was tentative. And you can say no. Okay? I know it's fast. I know we've only been together 9 months, but when I was in California, all I could think about was building a life with you. With Sophie. A real life. She took his hand. So I'm asking, would you and Sophie want to move in with me?
I sold my condo. I'm buying a house in Oak Park. 4 bedrooms, yard for that dog Sophie keeps asking about. Close to her school.
Close to Amanda's parents. Maya, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm asking if you're ready to build something together. Something that honors everything you've been through while also being new. Dan pulled her close, his heart full to bursting. Yeah, we're ready. They moved in December 1st. The house was perfect, big enough for all of them, with a yard where a golden retriever puppy named Rusty quickly became Sophie's shadow. Amanda's parents visited every Sunday. Maria from Lucia's came for dinner once a month and acted like she'd orchestrated the whole thing. And somewhere in the middle of unpacking boxes and assembling furniture and teaching Sophie how to throw a frisbee for Rusty, Dan realized he was happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way he'd thought he'd lost forever. Christmas morning, Sophie woke them at 6.
It snowed. Can we make pancakes and then build a snowman?
Maya looked at Dan, hair messy from sleep, eyes bright with joy.
Your dad's pancakes are terrible.
Hey, Dan pulled her close. My pancakes are a family tradition. A terrible family tradition. Sophie giggled. Can Maya make them instead? Absolutely not. Dan stood, pulling on a sweatshirt. Terrible pancakes are how we show love in this house. They made pancakes together, Dan burning them, Maya fixing them, Sophie stealing chocolate chips from the bag. Rusty begged for scraps. Snow fell outside the kitchen window. After breakfast, while Sophie was getting dressed, Maya pulled a small box from her pocket. I know I said I wasn't asking yet, but I lied. She opened it. A ring. Simple, elegant, exactly right. Daniel Rivers, you stopped on a highway to help a stranger. You gave me a second chance when I was building a career instead of a life. You taught me that success means nothing without people to share it with. Her voice shook.
So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you let me be part of this beautiful life you've built? Will you let me love you and Sophie for as long as we all live? Dan couldn't speak, could only nod as tears streamed down his face. Is that a yes? It's a hell yes. Sophie appeared in the doorway.
Did Maya just propose? How did you?
I've been waiting for weeks. She's been carrying that box everywhere. Dan laughed through tears. Your bonus person just asked me to marry her.
What did you say?
I said yes. Sophie ran over, throwing her arms around both of them.
Does this mean we're really a family now?
Maya kissed the top of Sophie's head. We've been a family for a while now, sweetheart. This just makes it official. They spent the rest of the day in the snow, building a snowman, throwing snowballs, Rusty bounding through drifts that came up to his chest. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Maya and Dan stood in their backyard watching the sky clear. Thank you, Dan pulled her close. For seeing me when I was broken. For believing I could be both things. For loving Sophie like she's yours. Thank you for stopping. For being kind to a stranger. For teaching me that the best things in life happen when you're not looking. She held up her hand, the ring catching moonlight. Detroit taught you to build engines. Chicago taught you to build a life. I'm just grateful I get to be part of it. Dan kissed her, snow beginning to fall again, the house behind them glowing warm. Some coincidences aren't accidents. Some strangers aren't really strangers. And sometimes the fastest way forward is letting someone else under the hood. He'd stopped on a highway because it was the right thing to do. He'd accepted a sandwich because he was hungry. He'd taken a chance on a job because his daughter told him he could smile about both things. And somehow, impossibly, he'd found his way home.